Have you ever watched a movie from beginning to end? And at the end of it, you walked out thinking there was some disconnect there. The story that they started with, the story that they started telling, did not make any sense. It did not connect to the point that they made at the end. There was some dialogue that didn't make sense. There were some characters in there that you wondered, well, what was their purpose? Why were they there? Why did that scene take place there? Some things just didn't connect, and it didn't connect throughout the story. Same thing happened when you're having a regular conversation. I'm sure you've been having a regular, like me, you've been having a regular conversation maybe with a friend, or maybe you've been to a presentation where you heard a speaker, a trainer, coach, and they were telling the story, and what they started with didn't connect. In the end, there was some disconnect for you. After everything was said and done, you were still somewhat confused. You asked, well, what was the point? Why was this said? Why was that dialogue said? Why was this character brought in? Why did it take place there? There was some disconnect there, right? I've been there. I'm sure you've been there. When I had the opportunity to work with the legendary Mr. Les Brown, this is one of the things that he talked about on a regular basis. This is one of the things that he drilled in his platinum speaker, coach, mentees, people who paid him upwards of $20,000 plus to be mentored by him. And here's what it is. Never make a point without a story, and never tell a story without a point. So I'll say it again. Never make a point without a story, and never tell a story without a point. So whatever point that you're making, how does it connect to your story? And when you're telling that story, what is the point? And it's not just for that one single segment. It needs to go through for the whole story. How does it transition when you start? How do you transition from story, from point to story, from story to point, all the way to the end? There needs to be a smooth transition where there's no disconnect. How does the story that you start out with, how does it end up? What is the point? You start with a story and you end up with a point, the purpose. And the audience there should be no disconnect. It should be a flow. Whatever dialogue is being said, there should be a purpose. Whatever characters have been brought in, what was the purpose? What was the point? Never make a point without having a story to connect it to, and never tell a story without having a point that you're making. So what is the point of the story that you're making? Your story should end up with a point, and it should be smooth all the way through, because that's what a story is. If there's any disconnect, then there's a different story. You have to remember, within the story, there's lots of different stories, but they all have to connect. So you're telling a lot of different stories within the same story, but it has to connect. It has to make a point. If you start something and you go somewhere else, then you never come back. There's a disconnect there, because when you end up, the audience is asking, well, what was the point? Where's the connection? I'm missing something. And that's exactly what happens. Now your audience is missing something. Now they walk away having to fill in the blanks for themselves, and that should never happen. The audience should never have to fill in the blanks for themselves. They should never have to come up with a point and say, well, maybe this was a point. Well, maybe that's what that person meant. Maybe this was the purpose of it. No. It should be clear. Never make a point without a story, and never tell a story without a point. If you really take heed to that, you will start to listen to people differently. You will start to listen to speakers, trainers, and coaches differently. Because you will now start to hear a lot of people, when they speak, they don't have that connect. There's a lot of disconnect. They're making points and not connecting to the stories. And they're telling stories that have no point. If you take heed and listen to those words, when someone is speaking, first you ask yourself, what is the point of the story? And then you talk about the story. What's the point of them telling that story? What is the point of them telling that story? So never make a point without a story, and never tell a story without a point. And that's today's speaking tip of the week.